Chapter 9. Depression. Finally I was able to leave my Pofa house and return home. I had shed a few tears as I said goodbye to people I'd become really close to, including Tom. I think he was relieved that he wouldn't be forced to drink so much tea. We exchanged phone numbers and said we'd keep in touch. My dad arrived to pick me up. He had a beaming great smile on his face. He was so happy that I'd recovered enough to come home. He became a familiar face on the ward, so joined in on the goodbyes. The other patients had grown to really like him, in part because of his generous and kind nature. Nothing was ever too much trouble as far as he was concerned. As I left my Pofa house, my heart started racing, the excitement of going home. It was like the feeling you get when you're nearly home after a holiday. You just want comfy, familiar surroundings. As we drove home, memories associated with the area started flooding back. The time spent hanging out in the street's corner with Alan and other friends. The places we'd visit. The newsagents we'd buy sweets from. Dad pulled the cab over, stopped at that newsagent's to buy a paper for me to read later on. We got home and Dad drove the cab into the driveway. My niece Montana was waiting in the front garden. She ran over and hugged me. Yes, it was good to be home. I vaguely remember Jenny and the girls visiting me, but the early days after the accident were like a blur, like a half-remembered dream. My sister was very relieved to see me out of hospital, but she understood that I wasn't the same Kevin as before. Walking into the house, I was glad to see that it looked familiar. I carried my bag upstairs and went to my bedroom. I went to the bedroom I'd had when I was 13 years old, not the room I inhabited as an adult. My brain had almost got stuck at me being 13, and even though I remembered pieces past that, it didn't seem to be any different. It was almost the default setting. Walking into the correct bedroom, I saw my posters and pictures on the walls. I remember sitting in there playing my Spanish language CDs, using my online motorbike racing game GP500. The pictures were of friends, families and motorbikes, days out, holidays, parties. I'd always loved having visual reminders of good times, so the memories were always there. Maybe I'd somehow known I'd need help in the future with my memories, but here was my life in photos. Once more I was overwhelmed by an emotional tidal wave of memories, and once more I was crying, this time in the bathroom. Dad heard the sound of me sobbing. He knocked on the bathroom door and asked if I was all right. I sobbed out that everything was too much. My poor dad was not well equipped to deal with the over-emotional son. He said to get Mum. Dad stayed with me until Mum arrived home from work. I could see how upset my dad was. It was strange to see such a normally happy man so sad, and not for the last time. Mum held and comforted me while I cried myself to sleep. My short-term memory was still patchy. One of my first visitors was Ozzy. We sat and chatted for an hour. It was good to be with my friend, but after he left, I could not for the life of me remember what we'd spoken about. I had to start following the advice I got in my Pofa house and started making notes. The longer I spent at home among my family, friends and belongings, the less I believed that life was a coma dream, and gradually accepted that this was my life and it was real. At varying times of the day, I would still get upset and cry. Whoever was with me would calm me down and let me cry myself out. It wasn't easy for my family and friends to deal with, but it was a sign that my brain was forging new pathways and healing. The hospital had advised me not to push myself too hard and not to be too hard on myself, but I was impatient and felt that because I was at home that I should be better. I was still working part-time hours at Daytona. I gradually increased my hours to 3 days a week, thinking that I can handle the emotions. I was wrong. I'd always been a happy-go-lucky sort of chap, and despair had always been a foreign feeling to me. So when out of the blue, dark thoughts, suicidal thoughts struck, I was not best equipped to deal with them. I was sitting on the bus, going to work, and as the bus travelled over Blackfriars Bridge across Thames, a panic attack hit me. Then my thoughts got more scary as I realised I could fill my pockets with rocks. Jump off the bridge, swim down to the bottom of the river. The rocks would hold me down. I managed to fight the feelings and continued on my way to work. The feelings would return and sometimes overwhelm me. One day at work, a princess saved my life. Andy, aka Princess, that's what I used to call him, was working with me and saw my mood darken over the course of the day. To distract me, he offered a cigarette. My smoking habit had been firmly re-established. As we sat and smoked, I started talking. I was so open and honest with him. He was better than any therapist. I told Princess about my despair, my bleakness, my suicidal thoughts. He listened to everything I said without judging me. That was an amazing feeling of friendship. After I poured my heart out, Princess looked at me, his long hair tied back out of the way of machinery and stray sparks. He told me about his brother, who had been injured in an accident similar to mine and had similar injuries, and how he coped. At first I thought the Princess had invented a fictional brother as a way to get me through this. But as he continued his tale, pain was evident. I believed him. Over the next few months, these feelings would come more and more regularly. One day I was watching a video about disability and brain injuries made by a company called Headway. It featured a man who had physical disabilities after a brain injury. And before I knew it, I was sitting there arguing with myself about how much worse my situation was. People make allowances for people with visible disabilities. They can see that there is something wrong. Me, I had a brain injury that changed nothing about me, and no one could tell just by looking at me. No one would make allowances for me. These thoughts swirled around my mind and added to my depressive moments. I told Mum about these emotions. Thankfully, she took it in her stride too, not overreacting or panicking. Her stock answer to me was, "It would be a great loss of life after all you've been through." One day she was even blunt with me, saying that if I did kill myself, it would end then. That did stop me in my tracks. It was no way I would ever want to do anything to hurt my beloved grandmother.